Welcome back to the channel. There are stories that cling to the edges of our minds long after the headlines fade. The case of Elisa Lam is one of them. It begins not with violence or scandal, but with a young woman on a solo adventure, a student exploring the world, chasing something as simple and human as independence. In early 2013, 21-year-old Elisa Lam left her home in Vancouver, Canada, to travel through California. Like many travelers her age, she shared pieces of her journey online, small posts about bookstores she visited, people she met, and the feeling of standing somewhere new and anonymous. Her tone was open, curious, sometimes uncertain. You can sense the restless energy of someone standing at the border between youth and adulthood, testing how far she could go on her own. Her trip was meant to be brief, a kind of break from the rhythms of university life and mental health struggles she would spoken about openly. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, but she was managing with treatment and family support. Her family described her as bright, thoughtful, sometimes withdrawn, but always kind. There is something deeply relatable in that balance between hope and fragility. She was not running away from life. She was trying to live it. When she arrived in Los Angeles, she checked into a budget hotel downtown the Cecil, a building with a long, strange history. Once elegant, it had become known for its troubled guests and the darker corners of the city that surrounded it. Elisa probably did not know its reputation in detail. To her, it was just a place to rest while she explored museums, cafes, and bookstores. Over the next few days, she called home often. Her parents said nothing in those calls suggested she was frightened or in danger. Then, suddenly, communication stopped. For a while, that silence did not seem alarming. Travelers missed calls. But soon, the quiet grew longer. On January 31st, she was seen for the last time. That is where her story began to twist into something larger than one person's disappearance. When police released surveillance footage showing her inside the hotel elevator, pressing buttons, stepping in and out, gesturing towards someone unseen, the internet became obsessed. People replayed those few minutes over and over, searching for hidden clues, a shadow, a reason. But before all of that noise, before the theories and documentaries, there was simply Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old young woman, far from home, full of plans. She was the kind of traveler any of us could have been: curious, hopeful, maybe a little lonely. Remembering that matters. Her final journey was not just about what happened inside a hotel. It is about how a person's story can unravel in public, how mystery and tragedy can blur into one, and how a single life can ripple through a decade of speculation and sadness. That is where our story begins, on a trip meant to inspire freedom, but ending in questions the world still can't stop asking. When Elisa Lam walked through the doors of the Cecil Hotel on January 26, 2013, no one could have guessed that this place would become the center of one of the most haunting mysteries of the decade. The hotel itself, a 1920s relic standing in downtown Los Angeles, had seen better days. Its faded red neon sign, the chipped marble in the lobby, the smell of dust and bleach all hinted at a place caught between glamour and decay. Elisa checked in like any other traveler. She had planned to stay a few nights, to explore the city, maybe meet new people. Staff remembered her as polite, slightly shy, and carrying the air of someone traveling on a budget, but with purpose. At first, she shared a room with other guests, a hostel-style setup common at the Cecil's stay on main section. But after some complaints about her behavior, nothing violent, just odd or unsettled, she was moved into a private room. It was a small detail, but one that would later seem important. Her last known day, January 31st, was unremarkable in the hotel's records. No sign of conflict, no alarm triggered. Yet that is the day she disappeared from the world's sight. That night, she entered the elevator of the Cecil Hotel, and what the camera captured would soon grip millions. In the black and white footage released later by police, Elisa presses multiple buttons on the elevator panel, as if trying to go to every floor at once. She steps out, peers down the hallway, then quickly hides back inside. Her movements are sharp, erratic, almost like she is playing hide and seek with someone only she can see. At one point, she waves her hands in the air, gesturing in a way that has been interpreted as fear, confusion, or perhaps even playfulness. The elevator doors never seem to close. She steps out one last time, moves toward the left side of the hallway, and vanishes from view. The footage ends there. That short, silent clip, less than 4 minutes long, became a cultural obsession. Viewers around the world dissected every movement, speculated on who or what she might have been reacting to. Some said she looked paranoid. Others believed she was having a mental health episode. A few even claimed the video was edited, that seconds were missing. But in those moments stripped of context, Elisa feels both heartbreakingly ordinary and deeply unreachable. You can see a young woman trapped between logic and panic, between reality and something harder to name. After that night, she was gone. No one at the hotel reported seeing her again. Days turned into weeks, and her parents, who had not heard from her since the end of January, called Los Angeles police. Missing person flyers began to appear around Skid Row, bearing her face and the hopeful words that still sting in hindsight. Have you seen her? From there, the mystery would only deepen. What happened after that elevator door closed remains one of the strangest unanswered questions in modern true crime history. The elevator footage of Elisa Lam has become one of the most analyzed and unsettling clips ever released in a missing person investigation. It is not violent or graphic, but it is deeply disturbing for another reason. It feels wrong in ways that defy easy explanation. The video, captured on January 31st, 2013, shows Elisa entering the hotel elevator wearing a red hoodie, black shorts, and sandals. At first glance, it looks ordinary, just a hotel guest trying to use the lift. But as the seconds pass, her behavior becomes increasingly erratic. She presses several floor buttons in quick succession, then steps back, waiting. The elevator doors stay open. They do not close. She hesitates, peers out as if checking for someone, then suddenly flattens herself against the wall, hiding. Moments later, she steps out again, glances left and right, and re-enters the elevator. She moves strangely, her hands twisting, her arms floating as if she is swimming in thick air. At one point, she leans out of the doorway, as if talking to someone unseen in the hall. Then she steps fully outside and never comes back. The doors finally close behind her. The clip, about 4 minutes long, was released by Los Angeles police in mid-February 2013 in the hope that the public might recognize her or offer clues. Instead, it went viral. The internet froze the video frame by frame, amplifying its every gesture into a riddle. Why did not the elevator move? Was someone outside pressing the hold door button? Was she under the influence of drugs, or was it something psychological, even supernatural? Online communities on Reddit and YouTube tore the footage apart. Some users pointed to the timestamp, claiming it jumped or had been edited, suggesting police were hiding something. Others focused on her hands, arguing they moved too fluidly, as if manipulated or out of sync with the frame rate. A few connected it to old ghost stories from the Cecil Hotel, claiming she was interacting with something not there. For investigators, the clip was a double-edged sword. It gave them the last confirmed sighting of Elisa Lam, but also unleashed a tidal wave of public speculation that often drowned out the facts. Police reviewed the original footage, verified that it had not been altered, and concluded her behavior matched what might be expected during a severe bipolar episode. Still, many could not shake the feeling that they were witnessing something far stranger. The footage remains eerie because it captures the precise moment where reality fractures, when a missing person case transforms into myth. Watching Elisa press those elevator buttons again and again, you can feel a silent tension like a door closing between two worlds. That video was the last trace of her alive. Days later, the search would move beyond the hallways and elevators of the Cecil Hotel toward its rooftop, where the mystery would take its most chilling turn. 19 days after Elisa Lam was last seen, the Cecil Hotel story took a grim turn. Guests had begun to complain about low water pressure, about the odd metallic taste of the tap water, about its strange color. Maintenance workers went to investigate the rooftop water tanks, where the building's water supply was stored. What they found would turn a missing person case into an international headline. On the morning of February 19, 2013, a maintenance worker climbed the narrow metal staircase leading up to the tanks. Each cylinder was large enough to hold thousands of liters, sealed with a heavy lid. When he opened one of them, he froze. Floating inside the dark water was the body of a young woman, naked, lifeless, and later confirmed to be Elisa Lam. The discovery horrified not only investigators, but also the hotel's residents. For weeks, they had been bathing in, brushing their teeth with, and drinking the same water that had concealed her body. The Los Angeles County Coroner's office arrived swiftly, removing the tank's lid and draining the water before recovering the remains. Her clothes, the red hoodie and black shorts seen in the elevator footage, were found floating nearby, along with her watch and key card. The rooftop itself presented another puzzle. The door leading to it was supposed to be locked and alarmed. Staff later claimed no alarm had been triggered. Some argued she might have reached it through the fire escape, climbing several stories up an exposed metal ladder. Still, once there, she would have needed to scale the tank, lift a heavy lid, and then somehow end up inside. Investigators struggled to explain how someone could do all of that alone, and why she would. When the autopsy was completed in June, the official cause of death was listed as accidental drowning. No drugs or alcohol were found in her system in levels suggesting impairment. There were no visible signs of trauma or assault. Her bipolar disorder was cited as a contributing factor, implying she may have entered the tank during a mental health episode. Yet even that conclusion left a sense of incompleteness. The logistics seemed improbable, and the timeline between her disappearance and discovery was full of blanks. The case fed into a growing storm of online theories, everything from criminal cover-ups to paranormal forces. For those who had followed her story since the elevator video, the rooftop scene became both a tragic ending and an unsolved riddle. Standing above downtown Los Angeles, the Cecil's rooftop looked ordinary again after investigators left gray concrete, metal tanks, city noise below. But in that quiet, the image lingers, a young traveler lost in a maze of isolation, fear, and confusion, ending up somewhere no one should ever be. That discovery marked the end of the search, but not of the questions. The public still wanted to know how she got there and why. Those questions would haunt every explanation that came after. When the coroner's report on Elisa Lam was released in June 2013, it was meant to bring closure. Instead, it deepened the unease. After 4 months of speculation, The Los Angeles County Coroner's Office declared the manner of death an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder noted as a significant contributing factor. There were no signs of foul play, no evidence of physical assault, and no drugs or alcohol in her system at levels that would have impaired her judgment. On paper, that conclusion seemed tidy, but every detail beneath it raised more questions. The autopsy revealed that Elisa's lungs were filled with water, confirming drowning as the cause of death. Her body showed no major external trauma, no bruises, cuts, or defensive wounds. There were traces of her prescribed medications in her bloodstream, consistent with treatment for her mental health condition, but some doses appeared inconsistent, leading to speculation that she may have stopped taking her medication properly before her death. To investigators, that gap could have been crucial. For individuals with bipolar disorder, even short lapses in medication can trigger manic or psychotic episodes, periods of disorganized thought, paranoia, or impulsive behavior. The official narrative suggested that such a state might explain why Elisa wandered onto the roof, climbed into a water tank, and drowned. It was, in their view, a tragic accident born of confusion, not violence. Still, many found that hard to accept. How could she have lifted the heavy lid, climbed inside, and sealed herself in? Why was her clothing found floating separately? And if she had experienced a breakdown, how did she manage to reach such an inaccessible area of the building at all? For critics of the case, the accidental ruling felt less like resolution and more like resignation. The report also mentioned something small but haunting: the absence of water in her stomach. 4 forensic experts. That detail suggests she might not have been conscious long after entering the tank. She did not struggle or swallow much water before drowning. Some interpreted that as evidence she may have been incapacitated or disoriented. The coroner's language was clinical, detached, necessary for the record, but difficult for anyone who had followed Elisa's story. It stripped away the mystery, reducing it to numbers, weights, and chemical balances. Yet the human part of the tragedy refused to fade. To the public, the report read like a missing page rather than an ending. The facts did not seem to match the fear captured in that elevator footage, nor the eerie logistics of the rooftop. For every question the autopsy answered, it opened 2 more. The official verdict may have closed the file for law enforcement, but for the world that had watched the case unfold online, it only marked a turning point from investigation to obsession, from forensic evidence to folklore. What science called an accident, the internet began to call a mystery that still would not rest. In the autopsy's sterile phrasing, one line stood out more than any other: no evidence of trauma or sexual assault. It should have been reassuring. It meant Elisa Lam had not suffered violence at the hands of another person. Yet to many, that finding made her death even harder to grasp. If no one had hurt her, if no struggle took place, then what exactly happened in those final hours? Investigators found nothing on her body suggesting restraint or injury. Her fingernails, which could have held trace DNA from self-defense, showed no sign of broken edges or blood. Toxicology results revealed no illicit substances, no sedatives, no alcohol above trace levels. Everything pointed to the conclusion that she had been alone, and that whatever unfolded on the roof had not been an attack. But absence in this case did not equal clarity. The lack of trauma ruled out one story, but left room for dozens more. People asked, could she have been coerced, frightened, or led somewhere under the influence of her own delusions? Could she have felt pursued when no one was there? Or could there have been another person, someone careful enough to leave no trace? Police revisited the hotel's access points. The rooftop door was locked, yes, but the fire escape offered another route. They tested the alarm system and found no evidence it had gone off. In theory, a determined person could have climbed from a side balcony, scaled the fire ladder, and reached the tanks without detection. But Elisa's body bore no cuts or scrapes that such a climb might leave. The contradiction lingered. Online, the absence of injury became a blank screen where speculation multiplied. Amateur sleuths analyzed autopsy reports line by line, hunting for inconsistencies. Some claimed the missing pages in the released report hinted at cover-up. Others suggested that the absence of wounds might mean she had been unconscious before entering the tank, perhaps fainting, perhaps already lifeless. None of these ideas were proven. Still, they spread, as mysteries do, in the vacuum left by unanswered questions. Her family, watching this unfold from Canada, stayed quiet. Their grief was private, not meant for debate. In interviews, they focused on her life, the books she loved, the gentle humor she carried rather than the theories. For them, the lack of violence offered small comfort, but it did not fill the silence of not knowing. Sometimes, what is missing tells its own story. Elisa Lam's death had no villain, no weapon, no final witness. It was a tragedy surrounded not by evidence, but by emptiness. That emptiness is what made the case echo for so long. Because when all signs of harm disappear, the mind keeps searching for the shape of one anyway. And the world, refusing to accept coincidence, begins to build its own ghosts. The question that refuses to fade is simple. How did Elisa Lam get to the roof? It is not a place a hotel guest could casually wander into. The doors leading there were locked and equipped with alarms. Staff insisted that if anyone tried to open them, an alert would sound at the front desk. Yet no alarm ever did. The roof of the Cecil Hotel was not a scenic terrace, it was an industrial zone, cluttered with ventilation units, cables, and 4 enormous water tanks standing like silent sentinels. Even seasoned maintenance workers described the climb as tricky. For Elisa, who was a small woman, it would have been difficult, though not impossible, to reach those tanks alone. Investigators considered 2 paths. The first, the rooftop access door, locked from the inside and alarmed. The second, the external fire escape, a zigzagging metal staircase running down the side of the building. Some thought Elisa might have taken that route, climbing several stories under the cover of night. There were no security cameras pointing at it, so the idea could not be confirmed or disproved. But even assuming she reached the roof, how did she enter the tank? Each one was about 8 feet tall, perched on a raised platform, with a heavy metal lid roughly 2 feet wide. Workers had to use ladders to open them. When Elisa's body was discovered, one of those lids was open, but by the time investigators arrived, the lid had been closed again. Whether that meant she had closed it herself or someone else had done it later remained unclear. This gap in logic, how she accessed, entered, and possibly sealed herself in, became the case's biggest crack. People debated endlessly whether the explanation of accidental drowning could fit those physical details. Some suggested she might have entered the tank seeking relief or safety during a manic episode, unaware of the danger. Others suspected someone helped her up and left her there. But no fingerprints, footprints, or signs of struggle were found on the tank itself. Police ran tests on the alarm system. It worked perfectly. Maintenance staff confirmed no roof access was logged. No witnesses saw her climbing. No one heard a sound. For all intents and purposes, it was as if she had vanished from one world and reappeared in another. That eerie impossibility became the spine of the mystery. If logic can't explain how she got there, people start to look elsewhere for someone or something unseen. Online forums filled with diagrams, floor plans, and theories linking her disappearance to urban legends or supernatural tales. The Cecil Hotel, with its infamous past, offered fertile ground for all of it. But amid the wild ideas, one truth held steady. The simplest question, the one about the door, the ladder, the tank, remained unanswered. Every official statement danced around it. And so, the story of Elisa Lam began to slip from police files into collective imagination, where fact and fear blur into one. When the elevator video was released, the investigation escaped police hands and entered the realm of the internet. What began as a missing person case became a public puzzle, millions of strangers dissecting every gesture, every pixel, as though truth could be crowdsourced. The theories came fast and loud. Some were grounded in psychology, others in conspiracy. Many were born from discomfort with the official explanation that a young woman had simply drowned, alone. People needed a story that made more sense than that. One group of viewers focused on mental health. They argued that Elisa's erratic movements in the elevator video reflected a manic or psychotic episode, consistent with her bipolar disorder. Maybe she believed someone was following her. Maybe she fled upward in confusion, unaware of danger. It was tragic but plausible. Then came the criminal angle. Viewers slowed the footage frame by frame, convinced they saw evidence of another person outside the elevator, someone the camera did not capture fully. Reddit threads mapped out theories of a hidden pursuer, a hotel guest, even a staff member involved in foul play. But police found no physical proof, no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no suspicious DNA. As those explanations failed to satisfy, the internet drifted into the supernatural. The Cecil Hotel's dark reputation, the suicides, murders, and the legend of serial killer Richard Ramirez, once living there, made it easy for ghost stories to bloom. Some claimed Elisa was possessed, others that she had played a lift ritual, an urban myth said to open doors to another world. And then there were the coincidences, so strange they felt scripted. A tuberculosis outbreak broke out in Los Angeles around the time of her death. The test used to detect it was named Lam Elisa. A scene from a Korean horror film released years earlier showed a girl's body found in a water tank on a rooftop. These eerie overlaps fed the idea that the case was more than it seemed. But the wildest speculation had real-world consequences. A musician who had stayed at the hotel known online as Morbid was falsely accused of killing her simply because his dark-themed music videos mentioned death. Internet detectives harassed him to the point of attempted suicide. The case had turned into a digital witch hunt. As the story spread through YouTube channels, podcasts, and Netflix documentaries, it became less about facts and more about fascination, the collective thrill of mystery. Everyone wanted to be the one to solve Elisa Lam. Yet behind the noise was a quieter truth. The world was not mourning a murder, but struggling to accept a lonely, senseless accident. The internet turned uncertainty into spectacle. And Elisa, who once wrote online about her battles with isolation, became both subject and symbol of a loneliness magnified by screens. Theories keep her alive in conversation, but they also blur her humanity. Somewhere between logic and obsession, the internet forgot she was not a story to solve, she was a person who never made it home. Long before Elisa Lam walked through its doors, the Cecil Hotel was already a legend, and not the kind anyone wanted. Built in 1924, it was once marketed as a glamorous destination for travelers visiting Los Angeles. Its marble lobby and ornate chandeliers spoke of old-world charm. But as downtown declined through the decades, so did the Cecil. What began as luxury faded into decay, until it became a cheap stopover for transients, tourists, and the forgotten corners of the city. By the 1980s, the neighborhood around the Hotel Skid Row had one of the highest concentrations of poverty and homelessness in the country. Drugs, crime, and desperation filled the streets. The Cecil became part of that ecosystem, half hotel, half residential building, a place where people disappeared quietly without notice. Its reputation grew darker with every decade. Between the 1930s and the 1960s, the hotel was linked to multiple suicides, guests leaping from upper floors, leaving behind only notes and nameless headlines. In later years, two notorious serial killers, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Jack Unterweger, both lived there at different times. The building's history became so saturated with death that it earned nicknames like Hotel of Horror or the Suicide Hotel. So when news broke that Elisa Lam had vanished within its walls, the public reaction was instant. Of course it happened there. The setting alone seemed to conspire against coincidence. For believers in the paranormal, the Cecil was a perfect storm, a place soaked in tragedy, heavy with what they called bad energy. For skeptics, it was a cautionary symbol of urban neglect and human despair. The hotel's management tried to rebrand it in 2011 as Stay on Main, marketing the upper floors to budget travelers while housing long-term residents below. But even a name change could not erase decades of notoriety. Guests still wrote online reviews about unsettling noises, flickering lights, and the feeling of being watched. When Elisa checked in, she probably had no idea of the building's history. To her, it was just an affordable room in a city she wanted to explore. After her death, the Cecil became almost mythic. Documentaries and amateur ghost hunters flocked to its hallways. Tourists took selfies in front of the elevator from the viral video. The hotel was shut down in 2017 for safety renovations, though plans to reopen as low-income housing have kept it alive in another form. For many, the place itself became a character in Elisa's story, one that seemed to swallow her whole. It was not just where she died. It was where a century of loss seemed to echo through a single, tragic event. The Cecil Hotel reminds people how places can hold memory, and how those memories can warp into myth. It is not proof of anything supernatural, but it does show how easily darkness lingers when the walls have witnessed too much. After the official ruling of accidental drowning, Elisa Lam's parents were left with more questions than peace. From their home in Vancouver, they had watched the investigation unfold in confusion, first the disappearance, then the discovery, then the flood of speculation that turned their daughter's tragedy into a global spectacle. When the reports were finalized, it did not feel like an ending. It felt like a door quietly closed by people who did not have to live with the silence left behind. In 2013, the Lam family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Cecil Hotel. They argued that the management had failed to provide adequate safety measures, specifically that access to the roof and water tanks should have been better secured. Their claim suggested that even if Elisa had entered the area on her own, the hotel bore responsibility for not preventing her from doing so. The hotel's attorneys responded swiftly. They argued that Elisa's death was unforeseeable, that the property met standard safety requirements, and that no reasonable person could have expected a guest to climb onto the roof, scale a water tank, and enter it. In legal terms, they said the hotel owed no duty of care for an act so improbable. The courtroom arguments stripped away emotion, focusing instead on logistics and liability. Could the staff have anticipated such a scenario? Was there evidence of negligence? The defense brought forward maintenance staff to explain that the rooftop door was locked, the alarm functional, and the tanks inaccessible without effort. The judge agreed. In 2015, the case was dismissed. The court found that Elisa's death, while tragic, was the result of circumstances beyond the hotel's control. There was no proof that management had acted recklessly or failed in their legal responsibilities. For the family, that decision marked another wound, official, final, and deeply unsatisfying. After the ruling, the Lams withdrew from the public eye. They stopped giving interviews, stopped engaging with the storm of online discussion. In a rare comment, a relative described the grief as a kind of noise you can't turn off. For them, every new theory or documentary reopened what they had spent years trying to close. The lawsuit had been their last attempt to make sense of something senseless, to hold someone accountable in a story that seemed to have no villain. When that effort failed, what remained was quiet mourning, far removed from the chaos of internet debates. The world kept turning Elisa's death into content. But for her family, it was never a mystery to be solved. It was a loss that never stopped echoing. The legal system had done its part. The case was closed. And yet the question of why lingered like static. Some stories end in courtrooms. Others never really end at all. By the time the courtroom lights dimmed and the case files were boxed, Elisa Lam's story was officially over. The Los Angeles Police Department closed the investigation. The coroner confirmed an accidental drowning, and the hotel resumed its uneasy routine. No charges, no reopened inquiries, no new leads. On paper, it was a solved mystery. In reality, it never felt that way. The police timeline was straightforward. Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel on January 26, 2013. She was last seen on January 31st. Her body was found on February 19th. Between those dates, 18 long days, she vanished, without a trace inside one of the most surveilled cities in America. For detectives, that gap remained a black hole of uncertainty. After months of interviews and evidence review, the LAPD's final report noted no criminal involvement. Her behavior in the elevator video was consistent with possible manic symptoms. Her inconsistent medication levels supported that theory. The coroner found no proof of struggle or restraint. To investigators, these pieces aligned just enough to mark the case closed. But closure, in an emotional sense, never arrived. The public was not ready to let go, and neither were those who had followed her story from the start. Online, every few years, the same question resurfaces. Could something have been missed? Theories multiply each time a new documentary or podcast revisits the case. Yet none produce fresh evidence, only re-examinations of what is already known. In 2021, the Netflix series Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, reignited attention, mixing police footage, interviews, and internet theories into one uneasy portrait. It did not reveal new facts, but it exposed a deeper truth about obsession, how the need to explain the inexplicable can consume thousands of strangers. Authorities have repeatedly confirmed there are no ongoing investigations and no credible new leads. Elisa's name occasionally surfaces in discussions about mental health awareness or as a case study in how digital culture can distort tragedy. Her Tumblr blog, which remains online, still draws visitors, people reading her old posts as though searching for premonitions she never meant to leave. The Cecil Hotel itself, change form 2. It closed in 2017 for renovation and later reopened in a limited capacity for affordable housing. The building still stands, heavy with memory but emptied of ghosts. So what remains? A file marked closed, a family who stayed silent, and an online world that never truly stopped watching that elevator video. The case is no longer under investigation, yet it still breathes in whispers, proof that not every story ends when the paperwork does. Sometimes The absence of mystery feels less satisfying than the mystery itself. That is what keeps people returning to Elisa Lam, not because they expect new evidence, but because something about her story still feels unfinished, even after all the official answers have been given. More than a decade later, the name Elisa Lam still drifts through documentaries, podcasts, and late-night conversations. Her story has become something larger than the sum of its facts, a reflection of fear, empathy, and our uneasy relationship with mystery in the digital age. When the elevator video first appeared online, it spread across the world within hours. What people saw was not just strange behavior, it was raw humanity caught on camera. A young woman alone, frightened or confused, her movements unreadable yet familiar enough to feel real. That short clip blurred the line between empathy and voyeurism, turning tragedy into something viral. The public fascination said as much about us as it did about her. Viewers analyzed her hand gestures, her posture, the speed of the elevator doors, hunting for hidden meaning. But the internet does not rest on empathy, it thrives on mystery. Every unsolved question becomes an open invitation. Elisa Lam became both victim and symbol of loneliness, of mental illness, of the way we consume other people's pain when it is packaged as intrigue. Her story also became a cautionary tale for digital sleuthing. Online detectives, convinced they could solve what professionals could not, swarmed forums and social media. Some did careful work, mapping timelines and analyzing documents. Others crossed the line, spreading false accusations and conspiracy theories that harmed real people. The case became an early example of how collective curiosity can slip into collective cruelty when empathy gets lost in the noise. Documentaries like The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel tried to balance truth and spectacle, but even they could not escape the gravitational pull of the mystery. Each retelling brings more views, more theories, and fewer certainties. What remains constant is the unease, the sense that something went wrong not only inside the hotel, but in how the world responded afterward. Beyond the speculation, there is a quieter legacy. Elisa's own words archived on her old Tumblr reveal a young woman who loved literature, music, and moments of wonder. She wrote candidly about her mental health struggles, her dreams of connection, her bouts of loneliness. Reading those posts now feels almost sacred, a reminder that she was more than the footage, more than the case file. Her death also sparked conversations about mental health, especially among young travelers and students living abroad. It became a tragic symbol of what can happen when internal battles meet external indifference, how easily someone can slip through the cracks when systems and people fail to notice. The Cecil Hotel still stands, quieter now, part history and part myth. But Elisa's story lives on not as horror, but as human fragility frozen in time. In the end, her legacy is not the mystery, it is the mirror it holds up. The case of Elisa Lam shows how deeply we crave answers, how far we will go to explain what frightens us, and how easily we forget that behind every headline is a heartbeat that once hoped to make it home. And so, as we step back from the details, the elevator footage, the rooftop, the endless online debates, what remains is something far simpler and far sadder. Elisa Lam was a young woman who lost her way, not only in a strange city, but in the fragile space between her inner struggles and the outer world's indifference. Her story reminds us how thin the line can be between curiosity and intrusion. The world wanted answers, but in chasing them, it turned a private tragedy into public theater. That viral video, watched millions of times, became a mirror of our own unease, how we can't stand not knowing, and how the internet turns every mystery into a collective obsession. There's something haunting about that, the way her final moments have been replayed endlessly by strangers who never knew her voice, her laughter, or the softness of her real life beyond the frame. The truth stripped of myth is quiet, a traveler far from home, overwhelmed, slipping into the unknown. What gives this story its lasting grip is not horror, it is empathy. It is the recognition that anyone, at any moment, can become lost between the visible and invisible parts of their own mind. Elisa Lam's life, however brief, has made thousands rethink how we talk about mental health, loneliness, and the responsibility that comes with curiosity. The Cecil Hotel has changed. The headlines have faded. But the questions she left behind still echo, not because they promise answers, but because they ask us to look closer at ourselves. If there is a lesson hidden in this tragedy, it might be this: not every mystery needs solving, and not every silence needs filling. Some stories are meant to be understood not through logic, but through compassion. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of the most haunting modern mysteries. If this story made you pause, think, or feel, carry that with you. Behind every headline is a life. Behind every case, a human heart. Until next time, take care of your mind, stay kind to your curiosity, and remember, the line between mystery and meaning often depends on how gently we choose to look.